Welcome back, everyone. My name is Ross, and I am so pleased to share the room today with CQ, our pastor, our leader, Dr. Chuck Quinley. I affectionately and respectfully call him CQ. And today I want to talk with you. I know that you're working on a labor of love. You're writing a new book. So could you please introduce that and tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. The book is called ReJesus Everything. I came across a statistic a few years ago, and it really troubled me, and it was that we are losing 60% of kids raised in church by the time they reach age 30. Mm-hmm. We don't know if they leave the Lord, but they leave church. And it's just, that has troubled me so much. And as you know, that leads into the deconstruction movement and all this stuff that's going on. But it occurs to me that most of the people who are struggling with they think of it as struggling with their faith. They're really not struggling with Jesus. They're almost always struggling with the many, many, many ways that Christianity does not align itself with the Jesus of the Gospels. In attitude, our leaders plainly do things that he said we may not do. And no one even, I can't say no one, but it seems like it's getting worse. And because of that, there's just a lot of people losing heart at a time. You know, after COVID, you would have thought, okay, good time to step back and say, let's fix some stuff that's gone wrong. But I think all anybody wanted to do was get back to church again. Let's get our churches going again. And we missed a good opportunity to maybe do some kind of a reset. But anyway, I'm just concerned about that. And for me, the only way to fix, first I have to say, I'm sympathetic to what they say. Because any of us that have lived because it's hard to even define Christianity, because it's sort of Christianity Incorporated. Because it's got, yes, there's the church. That's part of it. But the church? Nuh-uh. 40,000 denominations of church. So now you go there, you got doctrinal chaos, groups believing the exact opposite, pretty much on everything. I mean, virgin birth. You can't get much more core than some of the doctrines I could pull up now, and you will find groups that say, I'm Christian, and they believe the opposite of what the other, it goes all the way down the line. It's chaotic. So anyway, it's been a bother for me for a long time, and trying to say, because I don't want to say on the one hand, you have to just accept your religion, however it is, you just got to stick with it. Or you got to leave it entirely. If you don't like it, there's the door. I don't want that either. I think there's a third approach where you don't have to check your brain at the door and you don't have to ignore things that are so obviously not what Jesus said. And yet maybe I'm hoping for a new iteration, not of Christianity. It's too big. It's not controllable, but at least of individual faith and hopefully congregational life. I would hope that the book can be helpful for anybody that's wishing that they could have a church that's more in line. So,
yeah, the idea that by age 30, there's so vast swaths of the church will not be there anymore. I mean, that should be really, really concerning. But it is interesting and also so sad that really Christians, just even by name, we are followers of Christ. We ought to be extremely united, but that there is even more than one or two, like denominations or sects within the followers of Christ, that there's 40,000 is just so almost incomprehensible. It's like, how could that even possibly be? But it's also been so many hundreds and even thousands of years since Jesus walked the earth. So you could see how, humans being humans, that would have happened. Mm-hmm. So the idea of getting back to the core, ReJesus Everything. So what might that look like? What's like a main proposition within your book?
As we develop our thinking, we always have premises that have to get put in there or we don't know how to think the next one. One of them that I've heard is Jesus didn't do much advanced thinking. He left that to his followers. Well, that's a premise. There's nowhere where Jesus says, and I am leaving deep thinking to my followers to develop doctrines as you wish. I'm not concerned about things that Jesus said. I think those are so clear. The doctrines that divide us, you really could say there's 4 levels of, this is the part that would get me in the deepest trouble probably. 4 levels of, I'm not even going to call it authority right now. I'm just going to say, let's just do a dartboard. Okay, you got the red in the center. That's Jesus. He said it himself. So clear. He speaks in bumper stickers. Done. Then you've got people that he personally discipled. He picked them. He spent years with them. They saw him die on the cross. They saw him alive from the dead. He spent 6 weeks showing up, eating with them, sitting on the beach, talking, showing up in the upper room. I mean, they spent time with him. They knew what they knew. That's the second group. I'm listening to them very, very carefully. Then you've got people that never actually met Jesus, but they write New Testament. That's Hebrews and Paul. Paul never met Christ. He had a mystical encounter. But so you got those 3, but then you got 4. And 4 is everybody after those guys. And that's where most of our doctrine gets written in 4, level 4. And it keeps on being written. They never stop coming up with new ideas about stuff. So when you're talking about the major divisions of Christianity, there was one major split in the first maybe 500 years. But then you hit Protestant Reformation. Whoa, it's just like a piece of pottery. It gets broken on the ground. Christianity goes everywhere. And you got all this new doctrine. You got Calvin, Luther, and others that they are working out books this thick of systematized doctrine, and it just accelerates. We get new movements after that, and everybody just keeps feeling the authority to churn out new doctrines. So that's my pushback, is to say there's no way to fix Christianity. The only thing I know to do is read Jesus Everything and say, let me start over as a believer. And before I say, do you believe in absolute double predestination? Do you believe in free will? I'm going to start with Jesus. I just want to hear everything Jesus said, memorize it, and then live it. I want to live out everything that he taught. And then I want to live out the things that the people he discipled teach me, and let me rebuild a faith that is unified instead of which camp are you in, which group. Because the concerning thing for me is, we're all concerned about false doctrine, but 40,000 churches are concerned about the other 39,999 churches who are false doctrine. Right. So this is where it leads us, mainly doctrinal statements. As far as my experience, and I've been in the ministry over 40 years, they're there to divide groups. They're there to keep people out, to give you a list and say, do you believe this? Because this is our think. And if you don't think that think, you are not in our group. And you might not even be a real Christian, right, as far as we're concerned. Right. So it's not that it serves this beautiful positive cause. It almost always seems to be used in that law-keeping, law enforcement kind of way. We want to know who to keep out. And that. So it's just this fracturing, endless fracturing with hair splitting, everything, So I just want to say, let's start over. For me, at least myself, I'm going to stand on the teachings of Christ. I've got, there's a lot of things I believe that are not in the Bible. There are things I've come across in life, and I would tell my children, I tell you how that works. This is like that. And if you ever run into a person that's like this is what I suggest. Those are my beliefs. They're not in the Bible. I'm not going to make them doctrine. But if I'm going down to gospel doctrine, I want to build that on Jesus. And I don't see how that can get me in trouble, but I'm sure it can.
Right.
That's false doctrine. For somebody, it's like, how can you get in trouble for
exactly.
anchoring your theology on Christ, especially about salvation? I think it's crazy that the Word of God comes from heaven with a message from God to deliver about salvation. He is the source of that salvation, and we don't go to his words for our formula in Protestantism of salvation. That's just mind-boggling to me. Like, why? Why not Jesus? Let's read Jesus Everything as well. It won't exactly fit what well, good. Let's go with Jesus. If he messes up anything we're doing, let him mess it up. Maybe I'm sure we have. Maybe we built our own Court of the Gentiles mercantile establishment, and he wants to come and kick over a lot of this stuff and call out a lot of us and say whitewashed, the same thing he did the Pharisees. They were in the religion business. And I heard one guy say about his city, because it's from a city where it's a headquarters of a church. And he said, in this town, God is our business as much as our Father. And I think that's true. So let Jesus back in the temple and let him kick over anything he wants. Oh, Lord, in my life, please do that. If I'm doing things that are not in alignment with you, please rebuke me. I'm your disciple. So.
Yeah, I can really, really appreciate that. And even this morning, we were singing, one of the worship songs that we sang was Make Room. And the bridge is so inciting in that it's like tear down the walls of my religion, break up the ground of my traditions, something like that. And you just, as you sing it, you have to mean what you're saying, but then you also have to think about the implications of that. Because just as you're saying, I mean, whole systems of thought could potentially be just torn down if you truly do just try and live as our Lord and Savior taught his disciples to do, which is sad in and of itself. But so the idea of just, and it's like the Jesus quest, which we've talked about before, but just if I'm a disciple of Jesus, I need to know what he says, and I need to live as he lived and as he taught us to live. It seems so marvelously simple, and yet, for whatever reason, there's got to be more than one. We just aren't really doing that so much, and so that's really what your heart is in ReJesusing everything. You're just like, let's get back to the central core. It makes such sense. So, And I think we can all agree that we have seen institutionalized religion. Like, it's easy to find bad representations of that and see how that can be so divisive, and how religion can be marketed and Jesus can be marketed. So I'm very much understanding what you're talking about. But I think a potential confusion one might have when they're hearing you, they might even be thinking, okay, I'm completely behind this, I understand that. But then it's almost like, okay, so then should we just pull ourselves out of the church that we're attending now, and just try and live our own life, maybe in a communal thing? Is it like, do we just start our own house church now, trying to live more like a disciple of Christ? How might one who's really wanting to do that, how might they live this way while also still in the more institutionalized existing church?
Mm-hmm. That's going to be a hard one because it's not. There's not going to be an answer that is everybody's answer.
Because there's 40,000 different denominations.
Yes, absolutely.
And so many individuals in that.
I read a book a few years ago about. It's called Immoderate Greatness, and it's how civilizations collapse. They've all collapsed. 13 civilizations have come. Every one of them has collapsed in exactly the same pattern. And part of it is in the flourishing of that empire, they build a very elaborate infrastructure. It's huge. It is expensive to maintain. It is the height of their glory. And then what goes up comes down. So you always peak, and then you begin this steady decline. Well, now on your route down, you've got this gazillion tons of infrastructure, and it's weighing you down, and you're spending all your energy trying to prop it up, and it's cracking, and you're pushing, and you're not doing anything new. You're playing an entirely defensive game. I think that's happening in Christianity right now. The institutional church is decelerating. It's collapsing. You go to Europe and look in those old churches, you see a few white-haired old ladies. I mean, in a church, you just go to Europe. And you go to any of those huge cathedrals, and it's like, this thing used to have 5,000 people, 3,000 people. And now there's 2 rows in the front, and there might be 20 people. Right. That's happening. You go across American churches, very gray. Go to Japan, go to everywhere. We are losing youth. Right. And it's because the form of the thing we're trying to maintain, it doesn't, they look at it and go, I don't want to hold that. Come help us hold this up. Like, I don't want to hold it up. I want to do something else with my life. So I think there's going to be, it takes such open-mindedness, which you don't usually get in a religious institution keepers. Sure. They're usually so invested, and it's just kind of like that king in the Bible that God said, bad things are going to happen because of what you did to the next administration. He goes, yes. Yeah. Not on my watch. I do not have to deal with this problem. That's what I think it is. They're just all going, I can retire in 8 years. And they're just not going to deal with it. But this is the time, really, to close down, liquidate, sell some things, and get some new birth. But it's so hard for an old thing. And Jesus said this, that you can't expect old social fabric to welcome new things. You can't expect. So, yes, I think entirely new forms, which are really the old forms of church, have to take over. And there'll be like an in-between system, where some of these new ones are living and they're in partnership. And well, I just saw this. I was in Portland. Where was I? Spokane. I was in Spokane, and I was in this church, and it was gorgeous. It was little. Maybe 250 people could be in it. But it was so crafted. And I asked them about it because it's obviously old, like you can't build those anymore. And they said, this church just gave it to us because there was just a few of them. Oh, wow. And it was paid for 100 years ago. And if we would just plant a church in their church, they were so happy to say, here's the keys, here's everything. Wow. We just want to see new life in our church. And he said they hung around. And one by one, they've gone on to the Lord, and that's why we're here. And I've seen that in Portland too. Some real, like Door of Hope, got a really sweet space, and it takes that kind of heart where you say, we just want to see life, and we want to take our assets. It's parental, I do that for my kids. I'll do that for anybody young, and I think there's a lot of people that are in the older generation they have all the keys. I think they would cooperate. Especially on a congregation by congregation level. So anyway, there's hope if new things will be started, but those new things are going to be no better than the old things. If we go, we're the new Presbyterian church, it's got to be, we're the Jesus people church. And close your ears, stop listening to everybody. It's one thing to say, I would say most people have a certain level of wisdom in them, and you should listen to them. Give them a chance to speak. But first, everybody shut up. We get one microphone, and Jesus says everything he wants to say, and that's the law. Nobody can make novel doctrine after Jesus. He's done. We're done. Now, level 2, we're going to listen to other people's voices, and then we get down to level 4, and it's like, okay, it's open mic, and yes, Martin Luther, if you want to come up here and say something, John Calvin, you want to say something, those are not the apostles of Jesus. These are 1,000 years later with a lot of influences in their life. And I don't mean to just pick on those guys. They're just the most famous names that come in my mind. We need to hear from Jesus. He needs to be our prophet. He needs to be the one I had a friend who told me about a meeting he had. He's a Jewish Christian. He was talking to another Jew. And they said, you Christians talk all the time about Jesus is God. They said, Jesus is not even your rabbi. If he was just our rabbi, we would read everything he has ever written every month. We would be constantly reading his stuff. We would be talking about him over dinner. He would be the center of our religious world. You say he's all that, but he's not all that. You're not that focused on Jesus. Right. Not even at rabbi level. Forget God level. So I think they've got a point. I just think we have so many voices. Well, even to the point that you can say, I don't know, let me pick a divorce. can Christians be divorced? And someone brings that up, and then somebody will go, well, Jesus seemed to say no, but no, Paul says we're called to peace. Yeah. And then and it's like, well, is that what this is? Right. It's a room full of guys. And it's like, okay, Jesus, good. Let's hear. Okay. Yep. Let's hear. James, what do you got to say? Is that what the Bible is? Is Jesus one voice among many? Mm-hmm. And I think in too many times it feels that way to me. Right. And I'm not willing to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, I think he's God. Who else do I want to hear? Like, I want to hear Jesus. So,
yeah, I think that is just so true, because as someone who's in seminary and has grown up in the church, and it's just sort of a natural thing to have, I don't want to say reverence because that's too strong of a word, but respect and adoration is not really the word I'm thinking of too, but like we have received the idea of we stand on the shoulders of everyone who came before us. So we have received like the wisdom and the wrestling of thought that all of these men throughout all of the centuries of the church have worked hard to clearly think about and understand and interpret the scriptures. And so, like, for example, you mentioned John Calvin, Martin Luther. One might hear your words and say, well, their words are not valueless. And that's not what you're saying. But the point is, their words have become on the same level, if not higher, than the words of Jesus himself, whom they are trying to interpret. And they're just two different individuals interpreting not always the same. So the idea of just, let's let Jesus speak and let his words carry their weight first before anyone tries to interpret them, and then we just live according to that. It sounds really it sounds simple, but it's also revolutionary. And it also sounds very Jesus-like for us to like let whatever needs to be taken away be taken away, like the idea of we're the pottery in the potter's hand. Shape me, mold me, break off pieces that I don't need, that you don't need in me, and let me get back to just what Jesus taught, how Jesus taught that we should live, getting rid of all of that. It's like the idea of him going into the temple and flipping over the tables and really making a mess of the religious institution that had gone far astray from what it was meant to be. And so that it seems for sure that has happened within Christendom as well.
Okay, let me illustrate how far we are away from this. Okay, so you're in seminary. Okay. You would think when you go to seminary, it's a Jesus school.
Well, that's what I was anticipating.
You're going to study like every day of his life. You're going to read in the Greek every word he ever said. You're going to spend like 3 years studying Jesus, what he said, how he treated power, how he did ministry, how he trained leaders, how he dealt with the government, how he dealt with the poor and the rich, how he, like all of this, miracles, Jesus and miracles. Is there a way to learn how to do miracles like Jesus did? Is there everything? It's 3 years of Jesus school. Right. Okay. And are you doing an MA or MDiv? Okay. MDiv. This is 89, 90 units like that. It's like this 3 years. It's the longest master's program that there is, I think, in any kind of study, not just in seminary. It's like 3 master's degrees. It's huge. Okay, out of all these years, how many dedicated courses did you have or have you had where you are exactly what I said? You're studying Jesus in his own words. You're letting Jesus speak for Jesus. How many of those are there?
In the core classes, not one. Not one in the core classes. They were all electives. And you can elect not to take those classes.
Jesus is an elect.
It's just astoundingly illogical. Because it's like, because I went into seminary really looking so forward to learning more and really knowing like the Gospels and what Jesus taught and all of this. And I had to elect to take those classes. and they just went by so quick. And so I wanted more of those, but yeah.
But they had dedicated Jesus classes? What
Well,
did they do?
for example, you can take like the Gospel of John.
Oh,
the
you can
Gospel
take,
of Luke.
one of the gospel. That would
there's-
be a way to do it.
Yeah, there's one that I wanted to take, although unfortunately in my schedule I haven't been able to get it in because it's not available every term. Like the Sermon on the Mount, which would really be like a great class to take, and I couldn't fit it in. So it's just
Okay, what is not an elective? How do you see? We don't study. Let me say it this way: we don't hear Jesus.
Right.
We study about him through another lens.
yes.
What's that lens gonna be?
So, well, the one that since we're in this conversation, that is, it seems it should be the other way around. All the Jesus classes ought to be core, and then I'm just going to mention it because we're in the context of this class or this talk. Church History 1 and 2, core classes covering, early church all the way to modern day. I'm not saying they're valueless. Again, there's a lot that we can learn. But why are those core classes and Sermon on the Mount, the Gospels, why are these dedicated courses about Jesus not core? Should be the other way around. Because we're learning, again, it's like we're going past this center part of the dartboard here. So it's just very odd.
He is simply, for all of our words and our songs, Jesus is not the center of Christianity. He is not the central authority in Christianity. He had a definition of even like the spiritual path, spirituality. We do not follow his mindset towards spirituality. We have a very Greek, look up in all four Gospels how many times Jesus said the word spiritual, because we'll talk about my spiritual life. We need spiritual growth. If you're charismatic, I develop my spirit man. We do all this kind of stuff. Okay, now go back to Jesus and show me every time that he said the word spiritual, and I can go ahead and help you with that count. 0. He never said it once. Not once. He never said you ought to grow spiritually, because I don't think he believed we had a spiritual life. You have a life, period. One life. You are one whole being. You do not exist in 2, 3 different camps so that I can have, I can say, like I can grow spiritually. I can say I'm struggling with alcohol, probably going bankrupt, and I think my wife and I are getting divorced. But spiritually, man, I am on fire. I've heard people say things just that crazy. Yeah. And Jesus would just be puzzled at that. Like, there's no such thing. It's a make-believe world. Right. You're making believe that by doing this religion stuff, I'm praying, I'm reading the Bible, I go to church a lot, I feel emotional when the songs are there. That's another me. Mm-hmm. And that me, awesome guy. And actually, this is so Greek. Right. This is so Greek. It's like, I'm going to rise up and go be a god. I'm going to live among the spirit gods. And I'm going to leave this filthy old earth. This is not my home. This is not my Father's home. And that's the opposite. For Jesus, it's like I'm on his planet. I'm on the Father's planet. I'm here to rescue this planet because it matters to God.
So I definitely understand what you're talking about. And I also agree and look forward to the idea of re-Jesusing even my life, because even as a seminary student, I want to be a follower of Christ. I want to live as a disciple. I want to know his words. And so like what you were talking about, I remember you sharing that story maybe 2, 3 or more years ago, the idea that we as believers in Christ, as disciples of Christ, we don't even treat him like a rabbi. Like, wow, who even am I then? Like, what am I doing with my life? If I'm not treating Jesus, who I believe to truly be God in the flesh, I'm not even treating him like a human rabbi. That was so immensely convicting to me. So I want to live my life like that. So I really look forward to this book. So what reaction, what do you hope a reader of your book will do? What are you anticipating to happen in their life when they read your book?
I'm hoping that people who they feel burned in church, or they look at it doesn't match up with the Lord. I want them to take their eyes off of all that and don't just let this become this critical, complaining thing. Pull out of that and look at Jesus. Just draw a tiny little circle and get in there with Christ and just see who he is and open your heart to him and let him, because I don't want to follow a religion. I want to know him. And I believe you can know him. And this has been our experience here at Medialight, and especially in our outreaches like Lift, where Christ is being presented to people that they've never met a Christian, never touched a Bible. They don't know who Adam and Eve are. And we've realized we don't need to teach them any of those things. What they need is a personal, mystical encounter with Jesus. If we can get them to pray to him one time, even by taking a balloon and writing a prayer on it and going outside and letting it go up in the sky, if it's that elementary, which is really how we do it. But they just prayed. They just prayed to Jesus. And they're shouting at the prayers that floats up in the sky. For so many of them, something happens. And then they say, now what do I do? And we say, you need to learn about him. They start learning, but not learn, here's book and book and book. I mean, we don't do Bible studies for almost a year with them. What we do is we say, take my word for it. And Jesus said this. Let's all do this. We're going to spend this week doing what he said. And he said, I will be with you. And let's see if he isn't with us. Feel Jesus. Talk to Jesus. Let Jesus fix your life. And he does. And then they figure out who he is as they go along. But they meet him. Like, I know you. And I could be in a stadium, and if my eyes get anywhere near where your eyes are, I will see you. Everyone else is like white noise. But I see you, and it's like, I know Ross. You can know Christ. We just need to read Jesus our life. It's not about, is the church perfect church? Are they doing all? We can do better. But it won't matter if you don't know Christ. You're in a better church and you still don't know Christ. I mean, I want people to know Jesus, because that will change one touch. They will never be the same.
Thank you so much for that. I really do look forward to when this book comes out and reading it and recentering my focus. And I think really this book might be one of those that you can consistently go back to, because it's too easy for us to, our inner compasses are not great at maintaining true north. So it's always good to have a reminder and sort of a reset. Of course, going to the scriptures for that is best, but still. So I really look forward to that book, ReJesus Everything, and the idea of just helping people to know Jesus, to meet him, and to learn more about him. And that's what Christians ought to be doing. That's what he commanded us to do, go and make disciples. And that's evangelism, and Medialight is trying to raise up leaders to do evangelism, not just offline, which we will always ever need, but also more and more online, using the new language of the world, technology and media, as we are doing right now. So Medialight is striving to raise up new leaders to speak, to find their voice, and to share about Jesus to those who need to know, and also even to redirect Christians in their thinking to be more like Jesus, as we ought to be. So if you are interested, if you want to know more, if you have anything that you want to learn more about Medialight, we have Medialight.network, and you can come, and we have many resources, and there's so much that you can access on Medialight.network. So thank you for watching this podcast. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much, CQ, for joining me.
Sure.